Wrestling fans, welcome back to a very special edition of MWF Xtra. I'm Dan Marty. The man of the hour is the man on the phone right now, the author of the tremendous autobiography available, The Hardcore Truth, the one and only multi-time WWE champion, Hardcore Bob Holly. Bob, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Dan. Thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. I've been waiting for this interview, as I told you before the program began, since WrestleMania when I read your book for the first time. Most people know I am an aficionado when it comes to wrestling books. I love the history. I love to hear the guys' stories from the guys themselves as opposed to a promotion putting out their version of the history. And this is one of the best books I've read in years. I mean, along with the Chris Jericho and Bret Hart autobiographies, this one really was hardcore and true to the bone, in my opinion.
Well, I appreciate it, Dan. But you know what? I got to give credit where credit's due, and it goes to Ross Williams, because Ross, the one who co-wrote the book, he's the brilliance behind it. He's the brain trust behind it, because he did such a great job of making it sound like it was coming directly from me. And you know, and a little bit of history on Ross. He's got a background in wrestling also, so you know, he wasn't one of these writers that doesn't know anything about professional wrestling, doesn't know who the characters are or anything. He knows who everybody is, and he understands professional wrestling, and he understands, you know, a little bit of the politics of it and everything. So it was easy for him to write it and for people to understand it, because he actually, you know, he's hands-on wrestling, and also, you know, he's a journalist himself. He's a screenplay writer. He does movies. He does plays. He writes all that stuff. So, you know, the guy is very good at what he does. And I'll tell you something. I think if either WWE or TNA had him as a writer, they would benefit from this guy, because Ross has wrote some really good storylines just off the cuff. You know, he sent them to me in an email saying, "Hey, Bob, what do you think about this for a storyline for, you know, this guy or this guy?" And he writes down, like, you know, a couple pages of, you know, the storyline and how it carries on throughout the weeks and weeks and stuff. So, you know, if he was to get a job, and that's the thing too, he would love to be a writer for WWE or TNA, and I think they would benefit from that. But Ross gets most of the credit, actually all the credit, for writing such a good book, you know, and I appreciate that.
Well, I hope he's listening to this interview right now. You're putting people over even after you've left WWE, but he did an outstanding job with this book. And as I said, it's one of the best ones I've read in years. It only has a $19.95 list price, which is a lot better than some of the hardcover books that are out there for about $26. If you go to Amazon.com now, as we record this today on June, I think it's the 11th, the list price is only a little over $14, which I think is a value for, like I said, which is one of the most sincere books that I've read in some time. Where I've been around this a long, long time, I can usually decipher between a little bit of the BS and a little bit of reality, and this to me was reality, so much that I read it twice when I was down in New Jersey.
Well, the reason I wanted it to be, you know, like the way it was written is because, you know, a lot of guys, when they write a wrestling book, they tap dance around a lot of topics, and they're afraid they're going to offend somebody, or they're worried they may not get their job back with WWE or get a job somewhere within, you know, the companies. And I wasn't worried about that, you know, because I wanted it to be heartfelt. This is the way I feel. This is my opinion. And, you know, and because everybody has opinions, and, you know, everybody's allowed to voice their opinions too. And so I wasn't, you know, because I'm perfectly content doing what I'm doing. I'm not worried about getting a job back with WWE. You know, if I do, fine. If I don't, fine. You know, I'm perfectly content doing what I'm doing now. But, you know, I didn't want to tap dance around a lot of topics and to leave people wondering, like, you know, I wonder and wonder about it. You know, they still had questions. This way, hopefully, most of the book, they didn't have any questions. They had all the answers that they wanted, hopefully, you know.
What really got me hooked as I was reading the book, without giving, you know, any too much away, is that when you gave your honest opinions, you gave them both good and bad, and you almost never read that in any autobiography.
No, and that's the thing. It's like, you know, Triple H, for example, you know, I talk about him. I talk about the good in him and the good and the bad, you know, so I don't bury people. You know, I give my opinions about the person, whether I like them or I don't, but I also tell the good about them too, you know, and then, you know, and I'm not burying anybody, but I'm just giving my, you know, how I feel about certain people, but I also talk about how good they are in other aspects too, you know, so, and I think I gave a fair assessment in my book of guys and, you know, the positives and the negatives. So it wasn't a book bashing by no means on anybody. You know, I did talk about the good in the people that I didn't care for, you know, and I put them over.
You did, and I mean, in this, you know, most people especially when it comes to the boys, they have a theme and they want to stick to it. Whether it be a bashathon, whether it be I want to kiss WWE's ass so I can get a job again, and they don't go off the course, so to speak. Your book, you went back and forth on everybody, with honest opinions.
Right. Yeah, and that's and that's the thing. It's like, you know, because the thing is, it's like, you know, if there's bad in somebody, there's always good in them, and most guys, they won't find the good in somebody, and they'll just talk about the bad. But here, I do both. You know, if I like somebody, I talk good about them, but I also say the bad things about the people I like too, and vice versa with the people I don't like or don't care for. You know, I tell why I don't care for them, but I also talk about why, you know, how good they are and what they do. You know, so I feel like I was pretty fair with most guys. I mean, there was a couple guys in there, you know, there was, you know, I just really don't have crazy opinions about, you know, but I always try to look at the positive side of those guys too, you know, and I tried to, you know, I was being truthful in my book about how I feel about things, you know, and that's hard to find guys to write a book that they're being truthful about, you know, the company they work for or whatever, you know, and I wanted this book to be a little different than your everyday wrestling book. You know, it's like, here we go again, another wrestling book talking.
And here, and I can attest to the fact, as someone that's read it a couple of times now, it is not one of those.
Well, I appreciate it, man, and I want to thank everybody out there who has supported me, you know, throughout my career, you know, and even the people that don't like me, you know what? That's your right to not like me, you know, and but I hope you still read my book and maybe, you know, change your opinion about me or whatever, because I'm not this god-awful person that you guys, you know, a lot of people perceive me as. Because, number one, if I was such a bad person, you know, how the internet kind of paints me here and there, you got to really stop and think, would I have been with WWE for as long as I have been, you know? And I've, you know, people have said I was a bully and stuff like that, and, you know, that's the furthest thing from the truth, because I promise you, Vince doesn't keep people around that are like that at all. He doesn't put up with that. He doesn't allow that. And I wouldn't have been with WWE 16 years if that was the case, you know. So, and I was with WWE for a long time, and, you know, I went in, I did my job, and that's what I did.
All right, and I can attest to that. If you are a professional wrestling fan and do not like Bob Holly, you will enjoy this wrestling book.
Yeah, if you don't like me, you know, buy my book and read it, and, you know, because it gives a good insight, you know, of who I really am, and it gives you another look at inside the wrestling business too, a side that most people won't talk about.
Right, exactly.
You know, and so hopefully, you know, people will get it and enjoy it and have an open mind when they do read it.
Right there. Look at it with an open mind, then maybe see what your feelings are at the end of the book. It's about 300 pages long. It is well worth your time and your money. Like I said, I read it twice in one weekend, and I was trying to read as much as I could last night when I was putting my notes together for the interview today. One question right off the bat, what made you want to write a book about your career? Is it because of all the misconceptions out there about who Bob Holly is, the person, all the great experiences you had where you had an almost unheard of run lengthwise in WWE? You
know, actually, this is going to surprise you. It didn't it wasn't to try to change people's perception of me, because I really never thought of that. I didn't think about that. It's like, because I know a lot of people's perception of me isn't good, and that never crossed my mind for the reason to write the book, and it was just, I had got to telling stories, about my book, and, not about the book, but I'm sorry, telling just stories of the past, of things that have gone on, and so forth, and, and my wife said, why don't you write a book? You ought to write a book. And I'm like, you know what? Nobody's going to want to read what Bob Holly has to say, because I was just a mid-card guy. Nobody's going to be interested in what I had to say. And so we just kind of let it go and stuff like that. So we got talking about it again. And then I was like, you know what? I might as well just, because I got a lot of good, stuff I could talk about. And because, I was there for so long. And so I called ECW Press, and I talked to a fellow named Michael Holmes, who oversees ECW Press, and he said, Bob, the best thing to do is see if you can find a writer to help you write the book in your area. And so that was kind of a dead end right there. And so we hung up, and I just thought, you know what, I'm not going to be able to find anybody. So time went on, and, and I talked to my friends every once in a while. So Ross Williams over in England, who co-wrote the book, I got to talking to him, and he said, Bob, why don't you write no, I'm sorry, let me back up. I was telling him we were talking about some stories and stuff, and he said, you ought to write a book. And I was like, no, I just, I thought about it, and, I don't, think it's a good idea or whatever. And I did tell him, I talked to Michael Holmes, and I told Ross, I said, well, the biggest thing for me is I got to find a writer to help me write it. And he says, why don't you let me have a shot at it? And I'm like, are you serious? And now Ross, he's got a background in like I said, writing and theater and, writing scripts and stuff like that and journalism. So he said, why don't you let me have a shot at it? And I said, okay, if you want to. And so I called Michael Holmes, and he said, have Ross write us a little, a short story, and we'll go from there. So actually, Dan, the first part of the book that Ross is talking about and describing him wrestling me and stuff is actually what he sent Michael Holmes.
Really?
And yeah, and so they were hooked. They were hooked. They loved that part, and I actually enjoyed reading it myself. I laughed when I was reading it, because he sent me a copy of what he sent him. So, and Michael Holmes called me and got back in touch with me and said, "Hey, we like what he wrote. Let's go forward with this." And so that 18 months later, we had a book, and that's how it all came about.
Well, the wrestling gods were aligned on that one because it was a tremendous finished piece. Let's go through some of the questions, though. There were some things that maybe questions that were left in my head, maybe a couple for the fans out there. You debuted in WWE in 1994. I remember your first live appearance was at the Royal Rumble that year. Even with your real-life love of racing, do you think the Sparky Plug character resonated with pro wrestling fans at that time?
No, I don't think so. I just think they, because when you hear that name, it just it's like it's a corny name. It makes you want to laugh. I know it makes me want to laugh. So if it makes me want to laugh, I'm sure, and that's a character people couldn't take seriously.
Right.
With a name like that. Who's going to name their kid Sparky Plug? I mean, come on. Right, so, and it's funny because, I do have a background in racing, and so that's how, the gimmick all came about. And I had no idea they were going to go with that, until they sent my contract to me after I had my first meeting with Vince and J.J. Dillon. And when I saw the name, I was like, oh, no, you've got to be kidding me. But, I thought to myself, well, it's my foot in the door, and I'm not going to turn it down, of course, and we'll just see what happens. But I just don't think the fans took it as a legitimate contender for anything with a name like Sparky Plug. I really didn't.
Right.
And I know they didn't, so.
Well, there are some great stories about you riding the roads on the Independent Trail, working down in Memphis, Smoky Mountain, some great stories that you haven't heard in other places. And everyone works so hard to want to get to the dance, and then when they get to WWF or WCW at the time, if you for some reason received a full-time deal there, it can be different than what they expect. What were your first impressions when you arrived in WWF, good and bad?
Well, the good thing is everybody, it's like a family. Everybody's so nice, Everybody's just really, kind to you, when you first come on the scene and stuff, and everybody's willing to help. I found so many guys willing to help me learn and better my craft, and I think they were, when a guy comes in and, just and shows respect to everybody when they, you first come in and they see that, it makes them want to kind of help you along and stuff like that.
Right.
And as far as the bad, you don't realize how much you're going to be on the road. You don't realize how hard it is, because you really, really don't. And it's just the whole persona that you perceive is completely different when you get there. It's because you see all the glitz and glamour on TV, and it's nothing like that. It's a lot of work, and it's an eye opener. And I mean, I realized it was going to be a lot of work when I first got there, but when I first got there, I didn't realize it was going to be that much. I mean, it's
right.
Every single day. We were gone 30 and 40 days in one time, wrestling every single night, double shots on the weekend, and that's the thing. I had no idea they did 4 shows in 2 days on the weekend, and that was a surprise. But you just deal with it and move on. But yeah, that was a huge eye opener. It was an interesting experience. My first few months there, it was fun, but it was a lot of work.
You have some great stories in the book that fans can pick up about the late Macho Man Randy Savage, Rick Martel helping you out, some incidents with the Click that I think many will find interesting. So your initial years, right off the bat, were, I think, like you said, an eye-opening experience, if nothing else.
Yeah, it really is. And I think most people, they do find it surprising when they first get there that, it is a lot of work, and you make a lot of sacrifices. You're pretty much WWE 24/7. Even on your days off, you're WWE 24/7, and the downtime that you have is, it's almost like you're still on call. You're still going to be working too sometimes, on your days off, and it's different. It's a lot different, and it is a great experience. Don't get me wrong. It is a great experience, and you do have fun at times. And it's like any job. You got to treat it like any job. But and to me, it wasn't like a job because it was fun. Except for my last few years there, I got to where I wasn't enjoying it. But from the first start of my first day to the last, up until the last few years of my career, it was a blast, and it's not for everybody. That's for sure. It's not for everybody.
Let me ask you this. Again, we mentioned you debuted in WWE on television back in 1994. That was a difficult time for WWE. There were public scandals that were going on, many of which were created by the self-serving scum superstar Billy Graham. Vince McMahon went to trial with the possibility of Jerry Jarrett taking the company over. Were those types of issues things that affected the guys, where it was in current newspapers and on television and so forth, or was it just wrestling as usual?
It was just wrestling as usual because, the guys, no matter, despite what's going on the outside, everybody always, you didn't think about that stuff. I mean, you'd hear bits and pieces here and there about it, but everybody still goes out, works hard, and the money was tough back then too, because
right, definitely
through the trial, and he was spending so much money on that trial. They were so close to shutting down. They were just a turn of the key from shutting down, sticking the key in the door and turning it to lock the door. That's how close they were. I mean, the key was in the door they were just waiting for somebody to lock the door, and then the company would have been shut down. That's how close they came, you know. And but thankfully they didn't. But the boys, it didn't affect anybody, you know, because that's just the way the boys are. That no matter what's going on around you or within the company, you still go out there and you work your ass off, and you give everything you got. And that's just the nature of the beast, and that's what the boys do, despite, you know, anything going on around, you know, and just, you know, that's the mentality of the guys. Still go out there and give 100%. That's just, you know, and that's just what you do, and you don't have a second thought of what's going on, and it really doesn't affect you. It affected our paychecks,
right?
You know, a lot. I mean, it was a huge effect on our paychecks, you know, and but as far as affecting us work, you know, or work-wise, you know, no, it didn't have any effect whatsoever on anybody. Not that I know of.
And as you say that, I sit here thinking, isn't that pretty sad that a few people that were jealous and resentful, or maybe justifiably so, but a few people that went out of their way to try and stir up trouble and with various lies and twists of the truth, that they could have done so much damage to so many people and cost them, you know, jobs.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know the details of what went on, you know, nor do I care, but it is sad that, you know, because somebody left unhappy, they have to try to, you know, ruin a bunch of, you know, everybody's lives or whatever, you know. And like I said, I don't know the details or whatever. And as far as Superstar Graham, you know, I didn't even know there was an issue with him. I didn't.
Oh, dear Lord.
Yeah, and because he came, you know, he'd been in the back a bunch of times, you know, throughout the years that I've been there, and I always thought, well, there must not be an issue with, you know, any heat there with him, and you know, because he was always very cordial and stuff like that, you know. So I don't know. I didn't know that, you know, I didn't know who the main culprit was of
right.
the you know, that whole trial back then.
I have to zip my lip on that because I have too many opinions about the Superstar. We'll fast forward a little bit. Summer 1995, news comes out that WCW has the spine to try and go against WWE Raw head-to-head. WWE Raw was the institution. Everyone expected WCW to be crushed, and that's not exactly how it turned out. What were your expectations when these quote-unquote Monday Night Wars began, and how did things begin to change as the ratings gap got bigger and bigger in WCW's favor?
You know, I was all for it. I really was, you know, because the thing is, if both companies are doing well and they're going head-to-head, when you got competition is great. Not only for ratings-wise, but also for the boys, especially for the boys, because when companies are doing well, the boys are going to be paid good, and when that whole thing took off with the Monday Night Wars, the ratings went through the roof with both companies. They were trying to lock guys down with contracts and stuff like that, and they were offering big money to keep guys, you know. So that was a huge deal, you know, because when you have competition like that, it's good for everybody because everybody makes a lot of money, you know, and everybody's having a great time, you know, and it's competition is good. I always thought it was great, you know. I never looked at it, you know, as it was a bad thing with WCW and hoping that they would fail. I liked it because, you know, they beat us, not for the simple fact that they beat WWE, and you know, I'm happy for that. No, in a sense to where it made WWE dig a lot harder so we can come back and beat them, you know, which we did, and it made everybody, you know, put their heads together and really work a lot harder and come up with some great storylines and stuff like that to keep people's interest to where they wouldn't turn the channel. And I just thought that was the best thing that could have ever happened to wrestling.
Well, it certainly increased a lot of guys' paychecks. That's the one positive that came out of it for sure.
Yes, it did. It really, really did. And those days, those days, I don't think we'll ever see those days again.
Well, you never know what may happen down the road, but I don't think it'll be a road that we'll see anytime soon.
No, it won't happen anytime soon. And, I would love to see TNA something become of that. I wish they would get bigger. I don't know what it's going to take for them to get bigger, but it would be nice if they were able to compete at the level WWE is.
Right.
Because, like I said, it would be good for everybody.
Well, we have our good friend Uncle Al Snow down there running the talent relations, so it can only improve, especially with those corporate tweets that he sends out every day.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes.
I won't go in that direction, but at one point, it almost seemed like you vanished off the galaxy from WWE before your character was reincarnated. Was there any particular reason for that?
No, they just didn't have anything for me. And when they don't have anything for you, storyline-wise, a lot of times you'll sit at home or you'll be there, but you'll just be working dark matches, or they'll put you on a house show here and there. But as far, if they don't have anything storyline-wise for you, you may sit at home. And so then that's just what happens. Or a lot of times they'll use you just to get guys over every week, so... but yeah, at that time, it's just they didn't have anything for me, so I just pretty much sat at home.
All right. Well, fast forward a little bit further. Stone Cold Steve Austin and the Attitude took over as the Lazy Dinosaurs in WCW. Turned out to be a one-hit wonder. First, you became part of the New Midnight Express. Then you joined that lunatic we mentioned, Al Snow, and the Job Squad. The race car driver was gone, and we had the badass Hardcore Holly. What was 1998 like when the business was absolutely exploding with new records on cable television almost each and every week?
Oh, it was insane. I mean, it was insane. We were, everywhere we went, we drew a crowd. I mean, house shows, people were scalping tickets. I mean, we were selling out house shows, 20,000-seat arenas, like crazy. I mean, the lines were a mile long at the house shows. TVs were sold out. Everything was just sold out. You couldn't get a ticket nowhere for the longest time. I mean, business was so good, and you wanted to work. You wanted to be on the house shows. It didn't matter if you were opening match and you were putting somebody over. You were making a pretty fat check just putting guys over and not even being in a storyline. That's how good business was. And everybody was happy. It was a great time. Everybody got along so good. You had a lot of huge amount of input and storylines and character-wise, and it was a great time in the wrestling industry. I mean, it's amazing to pull up to a building and see a line a mile long of people waiting just to get in, to see you. Not necessarily me, but, guys that would draw the house like Steve Austin, The Rock, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, guys like that. And it's just an unbelievable feeling, unbelievable. I mean, and especially walking out night after night, and you look to the top of the building, and it's just, there's not an empty seat anywhere. It was just the greatest time, greatest period in wrestling.
And that's only a couple of short years after WWE, when they were going through their difficult times. They had some Raws that they were taping in high school gyms.
Yes, they were. We were even doing house shows in high school gyms. Back when Kevin Nash was world champion, I mean, we couldn't even fill up a high school gym. I mean, what does that tell you?
Well, that actually says a lot, but that could probably be an interview in and of itself.
Yeah, that could be. That definitely could be. And but yeah, it's crazy how the business flipped, going from couldn't even fill in up high school gyms to selling out 20,000-seat arenas, and that's all we did was those big arenas. After that, it was insane. It really, really was. It was a wild ride. That's all I have to say.
Well, for fans in the Boston area, here's a little useless trivia. Out of all the WrestleMania, great pay-per-views, TV tapings we've had in Boston, the most attended live event in Boston history was actually a house show in November of 1998, because obviously there wasn't a set or anything like that. So that just shows you right there how hot the business was.
Yeah, it was insane. We couldn't. There were a lot of times. We would get tickets for our families or friends or whatever. We couldn't. The boys, couldn't even get tickets for their family. That's how valuable those tickets were back then. So yeah, if you had a family member that wanted to get in to see the show or whatever, they couldn't. You couldn't get them a ticket or anything.
I was lucky I was friendly with Dennis and Lynn Brent. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let me give you a true or false type question. The diehard wrestling fans from the internet community believe individuals like you, The Undertaker, my good friends, Ron Simmons and John Layfield, were the keepers of the gate, the enforcers, the problem solvers. True or false?
True.
Any particular reason for that?
They were very well respected.
There you go. I love that. Well, I don't know The Undertaker all that well, but Ron Simmons and John Layfield are two great longtime friends of mine, and you can't ask for two better people. I know you have kind of a reputation that you mentioned earlier online, and the same could be said for JBL with some of his fun he's had over the years. But I had great apprehension before we ever did anything with him here in the Millennium Wrestling Federation, and he was nothing but a true professional gentleman in every instance we ever did anything together.
Yeah, and that's the way John is in real life too. He's John just likes to have fun. He likes to kid around with guys, and see, he's another one too that's misunderstood.
Without a doubt.
Or taken wrong, And John just likes to have a good time. He likes to poke around in the locker room and stuff like that with guys and stuff, and he's another one that gets a bad rap. And, if you got to know the guy, he is one of the nicest guys you'd ever meet and really fun to be around.
Well, and sometimes there were a lot of issues that needed to be enforced.
Well, there was, yeah.
The fans don't know those stories.
No, they don't. And most of those stories get swept under a rug and nobody knows about them.
Exactly. I always like to ask questions like that to the guys because, like you said in your book, it's always fair to tell both sides of the story. I'm sure you get this one asked a lot to you. It seemed like every time you were just starting to get white hot and really putting that right program, an injury took over. I remember around the time in 2000, I thought it was a great feud, a little four-way gimmick going on with you, Benoit, Jericho, and Val Venus over the Intercontinental title, and you got hurt. I think you broke your arm at that point. And so you had a lot of injuries throughout the years. What was your time like on Tough Enough, spending so much time with these people basically taking in off the street, and that, like, as we mentioned, the aforementioned lunatic Al Snow?
I had a good time doing that. It was fun doing that. It was you're in one place. You don't have to travel. I mean, everybody was fun to be around, and it really was a great experience. It was one of the best experiences that I've ever had working for WWE, getting to do stuff like that because it was just fun. Because I enjoyed training people and stuff like that, and like Kenny King, he was in Tough Enough,
right? Yep.
And I helped train him. He's currently in TNA right now, and he's doing a great job. And so, and I had the honor to be one of the ones to help train him and help him, work, mold his craft and everything. So he's doing a great job. But as far as the whole Tough Enough, that was enjoyable. I wanted to do more of them, but they stopped doing them for whatever reason. And but they were fun. I really enjoyed it. We all got along. Chavo, Ivory, Al, myself, and it worked. We were a good team.
And then that leads into the question that, like I said, I'm sure you get asked quite often in just about every interview you do. I think I understand it differently than where I've been around for probably too long, which is why I have gray hair at such a young age. But what is the un-MTV romanticized version of what happened with you and Matt Capitelli on Tough Enough?
It's just, I talk about that in my book too, and it's the thing is, it's like everybody gets black eyes and bloody lips, and it's like it would have never been an issue if he wouldn't have went on TV and cried, literally cried on TV, wanting to quit. And the only reason it escalated to the way it did is because he went on TV and made a big deal of it. It would have never been an issue if he would have just said, "Well, I got a black eye and a bloody lip. Just let's move forward. That's just the way it is." And the thing is that I explained in my book, when he was in the corner, I was trying to tell him to sit still, but he was moving around so much in the corner, he was like a moving target. And really, the thing is, who is going to quit? And in my career, my wrestling career, I have never physically hurt anybody to where they will miss a day of work. I've never done that. And, so I didn't break his nose, I didn't break his jaw, I didn't knock teeth out, he didn't lose an eye, he just got a black eye and a bloody lip. And for him to go on TV and cry, a grown man go on TV and cry, I couldn't believe it. I really, and a lot of other people couldn't either. And of course, there's a lot of other people that said that I shouldn't have did what I did, and I'm a horrible person for what I did. But I can't tell you how many times I got a black eye and a bloody lip. Hell, I broke my arm completely in two. I cracked my vertebrae, got a slice on my back, and you never not one time see me go on television and cry, literally tears come out of my eye, and say, "I think I'm going to quit the business because it's too rough."
I think you're forgetting a story I think a mutual friend of ours told me about how you almost died on a tour of Europe because your arm was about 5 times its normal size due to a staph infection.
Right, and I never, I never quit. And here he goes, it's like, Bradshaw, Chris Jericho, all these guys that have bloodied my lip or done something to me, or, anybody for that matter. What other wrestler have you seen go on TV because they had a black eye and wanted to quit and literally cry? Nobody. I mean, so what the point I'm trying to make is, if he would have been on Raw and got a black eye and a bloody lip on Raw accidentally, what was he going to get on TV and cry then too?
Exactly.
It's like, if it wasn't going to happen there, if it didn't happen there, it was going to happen somewhere else.
You got it.
With somebody else. It just happened to be me, and so, because if he would have got in the ring with Bradshaw, you better say a prayer for that guy if he's in the ring with Bradshaw, because he may not be coming out of that alive, number one, but he'd have definitely rethought, his career choice if he'd have been in the ring with Bradshaw. I guarantee that.
Well,
and so, for him to go on TV and cry like a baby, a grown-ass man crying because he got a fat lip and a black eye, I mean, I have no regrets about it. I really don't. But like I said, if it wouldn't have happened with me, it would have happened with somebody else. And the only reason it escalated to like it did is because he went on TV and literally cried about it. So that's the only reason people looked at me as a horrible person, because of that situation. That's where everything it all started, to be honest, and so, but I just didn't think the business was made out for Matt Capitelli. It really wasn't. He would have been, he was good. He was good at the level he was at. He could have been something, and and unfortunately he ended up getting a brain tumor,
Right.
which they were able to remove and get rid of. So he's perfectly fine, but. I just don't. I think the wrestling business would have been too rough for him. I really, really do.
Well, I'll throw a little input in there right now. I was glad it happened. Maybe I will come off as a jerk for saying that. I think the guys and girls that were romanced by the Attitude Era and what's on TV now don't have the respect for the business and what the guys go through, which you talk about in great deal in your book. I don't think they're properly trained. They were basically given a pass to Disney World with being able to go on Tough Enough and be trained by 4, professionals known worldwide on a WWE broadcast on MTV, and it's not a joke. It's a very serious business, and anyone that does not treat the ring, does not treat the people in the business, from those that set up the ring to those that they work with in the ring, behind the scenes, they deserve to have that happen to them, in my opinion.
Right, and you know, and it's funny because nowadays it's almost like the way the wrestling business is now. Before, your position on the card, where you were on the card, your position was earned. You know, like if you were going to become world champion, you earned that right to be world champion. Now, you don't have to earn it; it's given to you.
Yep.
You know, it's like, you know, Sheamus. Sheamus. I'm not knocking on him by no means, but here's a guy that nobody ever heard of, and 6 months later he's world champion. You know, and how does that happen? You know, and it's like now with Curtis Axel, I guess, you know, there's a lot of dispute about him. You know, all of a sudden he's working on top, and he didn't earn his way on top because nobody has seen this guy or seen him wrestle or whatever, and now all of a sudden, you know, he's working against Triple H and soon going to be working for the world title, and it's like, what happened to the days of, you know, these world titles, championships? What happened to those days where they were earned instead of given? You know, it's crazy how the wrestling business has become.
I think that what you're talking about right there is the true transition from pro wrestling into sports entertainment, but that's just one man's opinion.
Right.
But the past 10 years or so, trying to quote-unquote break into pro wrestling, it's almost turned into the akin of Little League Baseball. You sign up at a quote-unquote school, be trained by someone who you have no idea what their background may be. You put on these little shows, which in a lot of cases are an insult to the intelligence of the folks that are buying tickets with their hard-earned money from home. And it's destroyed what regional wrestling, you were there, you did it. At one point, it could draw reasonable, respectable crowds. The guys look like athletes. Most of the guys look like they could beat up the fans in the ring instead of looking like it was almost a middle school talent show parody of wrestling.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You know, and I think the problem with it today is you look at back in the day, and I'm sure you used to watch Dick Slater and Dick Murdoch and Harley Race and all those guys. You know, back then there was territories, and the best of those small territories, you know, went to the big league, went to WWE, went to NWA, WCW, and because back then when you had those small territories, that's where you can get used to working in front of pretty decent crowds and stuff, and plus they run their TV show, so you get experience not only working in front of crowds, but also being on TV. And you wrestled in a different town every single night, and you drove. There was no flying; it was all driving. You know, and you know. So my point being is, the best of those small territories, once you mastered your craft and you were good enough, then you got plucked out of there and you went to WWE. And then somebody filled their spot in that smaller territory, and then they build that character up in that smaller territory again until they're ready to go, you know, to the WWE. And nowadays, you don't have these small territories anymore, you know, running TVs or anything, you know, because in different parts of the United States, there was so many small territories.
Yep, it was like Major League Baseball. Every major city, instead of a team, had a little territory.
Right, exactly. And now it's just, you know, WWE, and they're global, and that's it. And so now you have these guys that don't know what it's like to work in front of a camera, don't know what it's like to work in front of big crowds, and they don't have the capability to learn, you know, from guys that have experience. And that's why now WWE has come up with their training camp down in Florida, and which, from what I understand, is going to be an epic facility, and they got some really good trainers there. but it still won't be like it was back in the day,
Right.
and to where you get experience like that. And I just, and there's a lot of cookie cutters come out of these training camps now too, where
Right.
everybody does the same thing. Everything is, the way they go for a pinfall is the same. And I've noticed that every time a guy goes for a cover, he hooks a leg, and it's almost like the guy that he's pinning, his back is on his chest, and he's looking straight up at the ceiling with the guy's leg hooked. And I've noticed just about everybody that does a cover like that now, and it's because they're taught that.
Yep.
There's, so that's just a small example of how everything's cookie cutter.
And it's two and 3/4 on the first pinfall.
Right, exactly. And so everybody's trying to get that last second out of a kick out, and it shouldn't be like that. It only should be for special events and or the main events and such. But it just a lot of cookie cutters come out of these training camps now, and you can tell, and that was the first thing I noticed was how they go for a false finish when they cover the guy. They hook his leg, and their back is on the guy's chest that they're pinning, and he's looking up at the ceiling. And it's like almost every match I saw, that's how they cover a guy. And it's like, there's got to be differences in the way each person does, something, and so, and that's just my opinion. So,
I think it's agreed with by many, especially those that were around in the old school. But back to the book, one thing I found very refreshing, again, that you don't hear or don't read about, I should say, in a lot of cases, was you actually spoke about money. Many don't like to discuss what they were earning. They consider it taboo, unlike professional sports or other forms of entertainment where you're kind of able to gouge your self-worth by comparing yourself to what other people in your craft are making. Do you think wrestlers would benefit by actually discussing their salary and let it be known as, for if nothing less, negotiating leverage?
No, they wouldn't benefit from it because, number one, back when we were really making good money, that's when we had competition. So now there's no competition, so they can pretty much pay you what they want, unless you're, a John Cena or an Undertaker, or Randy Orton, guys like that. But, from the new guy to the mid-card guy, they pretty much give you what you want, is take it or leave it, and I think people are really shocked to find out how much, guys are paid, because everybody has this perception because we're on TV and, we're these big stars and we fly here and fly there and do this and do that. We're on TV. We make tons and tons of money, and that's the furthest thing from the truth. Only certain guys make tons and tons of money, and you have to pretty much, you have to become a big star to be one of those guys that are fortunate. But there's no competition now, so you can't negotiate. There's no negotiating. So it's either you take it or leave it. But back in the Attitude Era, because WCW was so hot, you could negotiate. And that was nice too, and it was pretty nice when I was able to sit down and negotiate my contract because I could either say, well, I'm not happy with that, or give me more, whatever. It was nice to be in that position to call your shot. But now, because there is no competition, you can't call your own shots. They're the ones that they give you a number, and it's either take it or leave it.
Right.
Like again, unless you're one of the top guys. So
right.
So and people are are pretty surprised at the money that the guys that WWE puts out.
When I heard about some as I got into wrestling more and more and became friendly with more and more of the guys, at some of the payoffs around the time when you came into WWE in the early to mid-'90s, I was shocked by some of those numbers, big time.
Oh, yeah.
It's not what you'd think, no.
Yeah, it wasn't, and because, see, when I when I got my contract and I knew that I was going to be working for WWF, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have so much money. I'm going to make so much money. And then, you never knew when you were going to get your check. When I first, the first few years I was there, it'd be, 2 weeks, it'd be a month, it'd be 6 weeks before you got a check. And we got draws every night, so you would have to save your draws. And, of course, the draw that you took, you'd get a $200 draw every night. And, of course, they deducted that from your pay. And sometimes when it came time for you to get your check, they'd send you a check for $50.
Right, yeah. You took it out of the draw.
Right, and you'd been on the road for 3-4 weeks, and you get a check, and it's only for $50, and you're like, wow, So I was really, really, I learned a lot. After, it's.
You appreciated the Attitude Era a little bit more than some did, maybe.
Yes, absolutely, yes. And and back then, that you got a draw because you never knew when you were going to get your check.
Right.
And that's why guys took their draws. Because if you didn't take your draw, yeah, you would have, a nice check at the end of that, but you needed money to be on the road.
To live.
One,
yep.
To live. And number two, you never knew when you were going to get your check. And then, when you did get your check for all the shows, if you had 3 weeks worth of shows back, you're waiting to get paid on, and then you get a check for either $0, $50, or $100, it makes you think, well, wow, I only got paid $200 for that show when, it was over half full and this and that, so a lot of things run through your mind, and it's, but, it made you appreciate the Attitude Era and stuff, so, and it also taught you how to save your money, too.
Sure. Yep. Well, that's another story for another time when it comes to the new generation breaking into the sport as we speak. I have 2 more questions that I want to run by you. I didn't think we'd even be talking this long, but I've loved every minute of it. As I said, I read the book twice. I skimmed through it last night. And what I don't know if you're even aware of it, but what I thought was a really cheap, insulting, excuse me, almost a vicious attack on you online came from Simon Dean, Mike Bucci, who I didn't think you were really that bad with at all in the book, but he let loose on you on Facebook in a tirade. I don't know if you know about it, but what were your thoughts on having someone that, again, I don't think you belittled, but took personal offense to what you wrote?
Well, I really don't care what he wrote. I heard a little something. Somebody told me.
It was terrible.
Yeah, and you got to look at it like this. He didn't like what I said. He got let go for a reason. And he was only there for maybe a year, if that. So that ought to tell you everything you need to know about the guy. I was there 16 years. He was there, a year?
Right.
So I wouldn't have been there 16 years if all that stuff was true. So you got to look at it like that. So take a guy that's been there 16 years, take a guy that's been there a year, and make your own judgment.
Well, I just thought it was uncalled for. Like I said, I read the book a couple of times, and there was nothing like what he wrote in it.
Right. And the thing is, he would have never said a word about it. He would have probably always said Bob is a great guy and this and that.
He actually he opened by saying that. Well, he praised your work in the opening sentence, but from there it was repulsive.
Well, yeah. Well, and the thing is too, he didn't last in WWE, so he was there maybe a year, if that. So that in itself should speak volumes that how much he was liked in WWE. And I'm not the only one in my book that says what I said about him, but I get, he would never say it directly to me. I know that. And if he was to see me, he'd either run and go the other way, or he'd be really super nice to me and kiss my ass. So, anybody can write whatever they want. I don't care, but number one, you got to really think hard what he said. If I was the person that he said I was, why did Vince keep me for 16 years?
Exactly.
So, and Vince only kept him for a year. So that should tell you the story right there.
Well,
you know.
So just
he's not even on my radar. I could care less about him. And if you know, and like I said, if he was to see me, he'd either run and go the other way, or he'd come up and be nice to me, because he damn sure ain't man enough to say it straight to me. I know that, you know. So, but you know, so.
Well, so where I'm big on this, just for the public record, your dismissal. I'm trying to read his quote. Your dismissal did not come after you were found crawling around backstage stealing drugs from your brothers.
Yeah, I was. That wasn't at all.
Well, that was his quote. I just wanted it out there that, you know, that's not reality.
No, it's not reality at all.
That's why I wanted to bring that up. I think that's only fair that both sides be said. But last but not least, again, we want to put over the book, but your book was finished before this happened. It's a situation that is still on my mind every day. One of my best friends in life that is passed away now, and I know he's a man that you knew well, as the legendary Paul Bear. Your thoughts on him?
I'm very grateful to that man. Very, very grateful. He's the one that opened the door for me in WWE. He helped me out so much, and I would have never been able to even get to be in the, get to work for WWE if it wouldn't have been for him. He's the one that opened the door for me, and I'm forever grateful to that man.
March 5th, 2013 will be a day I never forget. It still weighs on my mind every day and every night. I still miss my friend a great deal. But, again, we'll save that for the biography that's written on him somewhere down the road. I'd just like to ask everybody their thoughts and memories about such a great human being, in my opinion. But back to the story at hand. The Hardcore Truth. It is available at fine bookstores everywhere as we speak. As we mentioned, it is also available on Amazon. Today's June the 11th. The list price for it was only $14. That is a deal, to say the least. Whether you love Bob Holly, whether you don't like Bob Holly, whether you're just a wrestling fan in general, there are great stories in this book that is someone that's been around wrestling now just about 20 years that can kind of decipher the BS from the reality. I consider this to be one of the finest wrestling books ever written. Bob, you can be found on Twitter, Facebook. Let the fans know.
You can find me on Twitter. I don't have a Facebook. My Facebook is just for family and close friends. But I don't have a fan page or anything on Facebook. But you can find me on Twitter at the Bob Holly. And, a lot of guys ask me if it's the real me, and I've been on a ton of radio shows, advertising my Twitter, and it is me. I don't know how you get verified, but it is me, at the Bob Holly. And and you can also, of course, get my book on Amazon.com.
Absolutely, and one thing I will say to the fans out there, if they're fans of Bob and they're unaware of the Twitter account, you do interact with the fans a lot, and I think that's nice.
Yeah, I do. I answer everybody that tweets me and asks me questions, and of course the ones that are, that get rude or whatever, I ignore them and just block them. So if you plan on sending me a nasty tweet or whatever, I'm going to ignore it. You're not going to get a rise out of me. I'm just going to block you, so you're wasting your time, number one. And number two, I always try to answer everybody back. Everybody has been so kind, and I really appreciate that. And I appreciate all my fans that have supported me. And, whether you like me or not, read my book with an open mind and, make your judgment from there. And if you're still not crazy about me, hey, that's fine. You can't. Not everybody's going to like me, and I get that, and I'm cool with that. But, just read my book with an open mind and, send me a message on Twitter, talk to me, ask me a question, whatever. I will get to you. I may not get to you right away, but I will answer your tweet. It may be a day or so or whatever, and sometimes I might answer you right away, but I want everybody to know that's my way to give back to all my fans, and that's, my way to say thank you for your support too. And like I said, I will talk to you. Just be patient. I will get to you.
It's an awesome book, an amazing adventure. Pick up The Hardcore Truth on Amazon.com or any bookstore nearby that's carrying it. You will not regret it. That is a sincere thought from a mind that speaks too openly sometime. But anyway, Bob, I thank you so much. I wasn't planning on keeping you this long, but I love great conversation.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for, giving me this time on your show. I really do appreciate it.
There's so much, fans, so much. We didn't even scratch the surface of what is actually in the autobiography. These were just some random thoughts that came out of my head. Again, it is well worth your time to read it. Whether you like Bob, hate Bob, it'll be a great collection to your wrestling memorabilia. But with that, we'll bid Bob adieu, get this up online, get it ready for TV later in the month. Fans, until we speak again, be well.